Hello and welcome to the Responsive Family Sleep Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Hawley, holistic sleep coach, lactation consultant, peaceful parenting educator, and mom. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by all the conflicting sleep info, frustrated with sleep information that just plain felt wrong, or searched desperately for a truly gentle and responsive sleep approach, then you are in the right place. In each episode, we'll be answering your most pressing baby and toddler sleep questions, busting those sleep myths, and helping you understand truly developmental, biologically normal baby and toddler sleep, plus encouraging you to trust your intuition along the way. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to the podcast. This week, we are going to be talking about anxiety around separating from baby versus just normal maternal child biology of staying close and nurturing. Now, this is a topic that, as you can tell from the title, from my intro, does not have a neat way of framing it out. But this is a topic that came to me from an email of a listener who shared a little bit about some discussions and situation in their family. And I'm not going to reference their specifics, but she brought up this question of like, when is it anxiety around separation versus when is it just normal maternal, infant, maternal child, biology of wanting to stay close, of nurturing and being in that phase of life. And I find this to be such an interesting topic and one that I do see people grappling with in different ways. And so here we are, right? I love when listeners email me. If you have a topic that you'd like to see me do, let me know, right? Like I love it. So prefacing this topic with a few disclosures, right? First is that I have a bias here as far as what I did with my kids. And I don't mean that in any way, shape, or form to be that I think what I did is what you should do. Right? Absolutely not. I never think that the choices that I made with my own family mean that that's the right choice for anybody else. But I did want to be doubly sure that I wasn't just seeing this through my own lens. And so I did chat with a colleague of mine who's a perinatal therapist and asked her like, hey, what would you talk about with a client if they came to you and said, I am feeling pressure to go away for the weekend. I don't feel ready. And I'm being accused of having too much anxiety around separation with my child. So that's our setup here. And so her email is informing this episode, and so are my own observations and experiences with parents and with families. And so is my own observation as a mother, right? So for full disclosure, I did not leave my kiddos when they were young overnight. And I did that for a range of reasons that I will share with you as we sort of move through this topic. But again, I do not mean to say that that's what you should do or that is the right choice. It was simply the right choice for our family. And I also just want to acknowledge that sometimes we don't have a choice, right? Whether that is about finances and work or whether it is around, emergencies. We don't always have a choice. And that, of course, is a different conversation, right? As is setting yourself up better to feel good about going away, right? Because there are things that we can do to set you up better for that. Different topic for another day. So let's jump in, right? There are layers here, and all these layers, of course, matter. So first is the cultural context, right? We live in a culture. If you are in a Western country like the US, Canada, UK, Australia, we're not all the same cultures by any means, but we do share some common threads when it comes to how we think about sleep and littles and parenting. So we don't value parent closeness, right? We don't value nurture. We value independence. We value separation. Or at least the ability to separate easily, even as we also judge separation, right? Like you're You're judged if you do, you're judged if you don't. So many things in parenting, so much when it comes to being a mom in particular. So I just want to acknowledge that as well. But right, we, for the last, 150 years or more, have made everything about sleep and babies being independent and not needing us, and separation. And as long as their physical needs are met, that's what matters. And so, of course, if we have that framing, which is still here today, right? Like it is still part of how we view sleep in sort of the mainstream way. If that's the way we're viewing things, then of course you should be able to go away easy peasy, right? No big deal. As opposed to thinking about it from the perspective that parents and young children are part of like an ecosystem, right? They're part of an interconnected system. And, parents and young babies are a dyad. They really are connected. And if you're nursing, that can be an even bigger piece, right? With the interconnectedness of the nursing relationship and nursing hormones, and all of that. And so we focus on that independence instead of that interconnectedness and the early years being, such a foundational period. And because I feel like you always have to say it, that doesn't mean that going away in the early years is bad, right? This is simply, where do we place value structurally? Where do we place value as a culture? Because that informs how we think about things. And so alongside that, and I'm going to thank my friend and colleague Emma for this in our chat about it, is how does going away for the weekend or overnight, how does that separation fit into your idea of what a good mom is or what a good parent is? And I think this is so important, right? Because we have these constructs of what a good parent is. What does it mean to be a good mom? And if a good mom is always there for her kiddos and puts their needs above hers, then going away would be in conflict with that, right? And that's something to dig into. If a good mom, meets her needs and has time away, then that might be easier for you to separate, right? To go away for the weekend. And so that's something to think about. Again, there isn't a right or wrong answer here, except for that your needs matter, right? Of course, as a parent, your needs matter. And what way you take care of those needs is different from person to person. So we have kind of how does taking trips away at the stage that you're in kind of fit into your concept of being a good parent? And that is a huge, huge topic, and so individual. Right. And it's influenced by the culture that we live in, because that cultural context of believing that babies and young children should be independent and like easy around sleep and not need us a lot, and handle kind of what we throw at them, that shapes, right, how you think about being a good parent, a good mother. And I think the idea that we should be able to be bounced back very quickly to our old self and do all the things that we could do pre-baby is another cultural layer here. We barely even set aside like the immediate postpartum period as a protected new space, let alone realizing that it can take like up to 2 years for your body to completely recover from pregnancy, right? And birth. And so it can take a while, and we're not the same person, and our priorities aren't the same, and they're not actually supposed to be the same, but we have this belief that they are culturally. And so of course that is going to shape your decision making. Now, I want to layer in here anxiety and parental instinct, because I think they're really important as you think through these types of situations. And I say this because sometimes it is about anxiety. Some parents are anxious and separation really triggers that anxiety. And that's really different than simply feeling you're not ready. And so it's hard because we have to trust our instincts as parents. And so much of my work is around trusting your instincts, trusting your intuition. You know you and your child best. And that comes with knowing if you're just not ready and it's not worth it and it's not the time to leave overnight. Right? But also, I think it is important to examine this through an anxiety lens and say, like, am I an anxious person? Do I have a lot of anxiety around being a parent, around my kiddo and their welfare? Because if you're showing a lot of general anxiety signs, if you have postpartum anxiety, if you're an anxious person, it's possible that you are really anxious about this separation and making decisions based on anxiety. And that's, of course, something you want to support and explore, right? But we can't tell parents to trust their instincts and then tell them their instincts are anxiety. If they're not showing other signs of anxiety, if you really don't feel like that's driving the decision, then, you know your situation best. But I also kind of think that from an evolutionary standpoint, I don't know if a little bit of anxiety around separation isn't normal, right? Like, it seems normal to me that you would be anxious leaving a young child alone. I mean, not alone, but like with other caregivers. A certain level of that seems normal to me. I think, as with everything kind of worry and anxiety related, it has to be the level of impact it has on your life. Kind of thinking about myself here, right? Like, I didn't leave my kids when they were little overnight. I probably would have been anxious had I been forced to. And I didn't really have a ton of anxiety, like, more generally. So I didn't have like postpartum anxiety or anything. So I think there's a scale here, again, just kind of bringing my own experience in a bit. But if we're going to talk about anxiety, right, I think the supports you have to go away matter here. And what I mean by that is, do you have trusted caregivers to take care of baby? And is your baby or your toddler comfortable with those people? Because it would be really understandable to be anxious if you're leaving your little with somebody who hasn't spent a lot of time caring for them, or has never supported them with sleep, or has trouble staying regulated when your child is upset, or you're afraid won't be responsive in the same way that you are, right? To me, that is just logical. Of course, you are going to be anxious and not want to leave your kiddo in that situation. So the flip side of that is, like, do you have family that's really well involved and able to step in? If you're leaving them with your partner, is your kiddo comfortable? Has your partner done sleep? Is everyone going to be responsive? These things matter. It's not a clear-cut thing here, because if you don't have that, obviously it's a different story than if you do. Now, in my family, I did the majority of nighttime parenting when our kids were really little. My husband was very willing to be involved and was whenever I asked, but it's simply what worked best for our family. We were bed sharing, I was nursing. My sleep was much less disrupted. And so anytime I couldn't get them back to sleep easily with nursing, my husband got up with them and would rock them. And that worked fine. So for my kiddos, leaving them overnight in the first couple of years would have been a huge shift for them when it comes to sleep. And that mattered. Like, to me, that mattered in my decision, right? So there's logistics like that. Another logistic for me was just the hassle with being a nursing parent. If I had a choice, I didn't really want to be separated from my kids and have to pump. I was lucky. I didn't have work trips. I was working in an office job when my oldest was a baby, and with my youngest, I was already working for myself and working from home. So that was, of course, different, but I didn't have to do that. And so if I didn't have to do that, I didn't want to do it because frankly, it was a pain. I didn't like pumping. I didn't want to be away and have to wake up to pump. I didn't want to risk my supply dropping. As my kids were toddlers, I wasn't ready to wean them. So I wasn't necessarily interested in sort of those awkward dynamics of like maintaining supply. Would this be the thing that weaned them? I mean, looking back, no. Absolutely not. My kids are very persistent nursers, but for me, it was really important to nurse at least until 2, following World Health Organization recommendations. And so under that, I was like, I don't want this to be the thing that weans them. That might have been a little bit of irrational anxiety there, I'll fully admit. But, it was what it was. So the logistics of being away, like, do you have the support? Is it going to be a hassle to be away? Do you think your child might be really stressed and, because you don't have the right supports or because they're in a stage of separation anxiety, right? Which is totally developmentally normal. Just like, the need to make sure your kids are cared for, totally normal. And then I think is it worth it to you, right? So for me, there wasn't anything that I wanted to do badly enough to deal with all the hassle, logistics, and stress of going away for a weekend. There wasn't anything I wanted to do badly enough until my kids were a bit older. And that matters for me. I think for a lot of parents, it's like, do I want to do this enough that it's worth it? And sometimes that answer is a resounding yes, of course, right? And sometimes the answer is no, and that's okay as well. We get a lot of pressure, right? As with so many parenting decisions. And so family or even sometimes our partner, our spouse can have an opinion on how we're navigating this decision, right? And so we can get judgment and we can get pressure. And that's a problem because it isn't someone else's decision to make all the time. And yes, if it's our partner and they want a weekend away, they shouldn't want a weekend away if you're going to be anxious and not enjoy it, or if they're asking you to go against your instincts. And so I think here it's helpful to be open-minded, like, is my partner seeing anxiety in me in a way that I'm not seeing, right? Which of course relies on good communication between the two of you to discuss. But the flip side to that is, are they just judging my decision? And that's a problem, right? Are they kind of weaponizing anxiety against me because they are not okay with the decision to say, hey, this is my baby needs me the most. My toddler needs me the most now. It doesn't feel like the right time to go away, and that time will come. That's messy, right? It's really messy. And so as you can see, I'm talking through all these options, and there isn't a right or wrong answer because there's so many layers, right? There's like this cultural obsession we have, and how does that feed into what does it mean to be a good parent to us? There are some times when it is actually anxiety, and of course you want to get that anxiety supported, but there's also times when that anxiety is justified, right? And then there's the logistics. Is it worth it? Do you have the supports you need? Like, what happens when you don't have a partner that can support your kiddo while you're away for the weekend, or you don't have family nearby that you feel comfortable? Like that's going to shape things, right? And then fundamentally, we should not be pressuring other people around these decisions. They're really personal. And if it is a conflict between you and your partner about both of you going away together, then obviously you need to talk through all these layers because you're not going to have fun if you're not both on the same page. And I do think it's important to remember that this is a season, right? Babies and young toddlers, the first couple years, the first 3 years, these are really intense periods. This is the most intense around like the physical need for closeness. And so saying, no, I'm not ready now doesn't mean you're saying, I'm never going to be ready. And obviously, if you're never feeling ready, there might be a point where it is anxiety and it does need supports. But not being ready to leave your 6-month-old or your 9-month-old or your 15-month-old, or even your 2-year-old overnight, that doesn't inherently mean there's something wrong with you, and that it's abnormal for you not to be ready to leave them. So I hope this is helpful. I feel like it's a bit rambling, but I hope it gives you some food for thought, and to remember there is not a right or wrong choice here. It's really about how you feel, thinking through these different layers, and about not pressuring other people, not feeling pressured, really being able to make your own decisions and to discuss with your partner, your spouse, your family, so that you can do what feels right. Thank you for joining me today. I hope this episode left you feeling more informed, confident, and encouraged on your sleep journey. And just a reminder before you go that nothing in this episode is individualized to your specific sleep situation, nor is it to be taken as medical advice. Take what resonates, ignore what doesn't, and check with your healthcare provider about any medical concerns. Take a moment to subscribe to this podcast so that you'll never miss an episode. And take a moment to rate, review, or share an episode you love on social media. All of that helps parents just like you find me, this podcast, and this gentle and responsive sleep information. I'll see you next time.